All political entities come to an end. It would have been so better for Rome if they figured out that their empire was moribund, in decline, and that it was time to end it. No meaningful reform would ever come from the Senate. Why wait for the barbarians to break it up, or some other disaster to dissolve the Union? Give way to the governors and the unified nationalities in Greece, Asia Minor, and Iberia a chance to make their own way. The animating energy of the founding was long gone, and the government was a confused mess of competing ethnic groups, ideologies, and duplicitous merchants out to get monopoly or favor the rest of the empire be damned. Would only they see past the romance of Rome and let go of this counterfeit of those heady days of its vitality. Or just stop throwing away good money for bad, recognizing that it's not what it used to be and just move on. We know America's now in no man's land. What is American? Is it a religion? No. Is it a race? Well, heavens no. How dare I ask such a question? Well, is it a view on government? Not even that. You can be anyone, worship or not worship any god, and believe anything about the ideal society and still be an American. And so, American, and thus America, is rendered meaningless. The incoherence is manifest. Let's look at a market provision of a service. I'm thinking about medical services here, but it could really be anything. It could be schools or food or anything else. In this system, the rich pay taxes to fund the government to pay the poor enough to afford the services. But the rich themselves pay for their own service, and everyone else just pays for themselves. Or we can look at socialized or universal or single-payer provision of a service. Everyone who can afford it pays in, and the government doles out the service on the basis of need. The rich pay more in taxes, and usually have enough to pay for premium private services as well, the premium schools, premium healthcare, or whatever. We've all heard the pluses and minuses of each approach, but both methods are fundamentally coherent and both will work. But what happens when neither the free marketers or the socialists dominate? Well, you get the firms lobbying the government to grant them all sorts of monopolies and regulations that help them. It's kind of a market because people are buying from private companies and they see the big logos and they see it's a corporation and stuff. But the government heavily intervenes, so the firms get barriers to entry, laws requiring people to buy something, saying you can only buy from a firm in your state, or that any new firm has to be licensed. And who controls licensing? Well, government. Well, who controls government, at least in the context of, say, medical licensing? Well, the firms. And so they can jack up the prices to where medicine, medical insurance, and drugs are more expensive in the US than anywhere on the planet, and you have to buy it, and the poor aren't necessarily being covered depending on where they live. And nobody can stop this because there's no unified opposition. The Senate is divided between party, divided between ethnic interests who only want theirs. Why worry yourself over overarching problems of the empire? Just take back some more government money for your constituency, or get some tax cuts for them if your constituents are rich, and do one of those two things and you're set for re-election. At the very least, breaking up the United States would free you from all of those people with all of the wrong ideas about how things to be done that you hate. So all right, all this sounds good. Let's do it tomorrow. I'll call Trump and tell him that we had this talk and we've decided to partition the United States into new countries. Of course, it's not something that's going to come easily, but take heart. In 2014, 24% of Americans supported their state seceding, while 53% opposed. If you think that looks grim, remember, by comparison, Trump's approval rating in February of 2016 was 29% versus 66% disapproval. there's a little bit of an uphill battle to climb, but remember, secession is not bound to one end of the traditional political spectrum or to specific racial groups in the way that the Democrat or Republican parties are. There are no limits to who can support partition. The ideal solution is, of course, a managed top-down partition. The separatists take control over the federal government and manage the partition from the top down. Some state breakups are violent. The breakup of Yugoslavia was violent, but the breakup of the Soviet Union was not. The breakup of Czech and Slovakia was peaceful. The independence of the United States from Britain, well, that was violent, but the independence of Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa from Britain was achieved peacefully. The Soviet Union violently put down an independence attempt in Germany in 1953, put down one in Hungary in 1956, and one in Czechoslovakia in 1968. But then, a few years later, 1989 to 1991, the Soviet Union just didn't stop the Warsaw Pact, the whole of it, and various Soviet republics from leaving the Soviet Union. So, some say that because the United States went to war to prevent the independence of the southeastern United States over slavery in 1861 means that the current government would go to war to stop separatist factions today. But if the separatists control the executive branch anyway, what government would there even be to stop it? Some people would have to move, but 12% of the US population moves every year. Say that for partition to work, a full 1/3 of the US population would have to move. Probably not, but let's just go with this. If the move orders are spaced out over 11 years, well then that's only 3% more people moving every year. So 15% of the US population moves instead of 12%. And this would happen over 11 years at the most. And some people, of course, who are already going to move anyway, may just change the location that they're going to move to based on what the new countries are going to be. But frankly, when you decide to break up the US into new countries, lines are drawn so as to minimize how many people have to move in the first place. And the Republican States of America doesn't have to be 100% Republican, and Aztlan doesn't have to be 100% Amerindian. The point is just that these groups are a comfortable majority and control the government over these areas. Some holdouts certainly can remain, and we can have protocols and rules for dealing with holdouts and what they have to do to remain a holdout and what criteria by which to deport them. But none of those specifics need to be outlined right here. These are just sort of the broad strokes. This is a partition I came up with based on county level data on race and voting. I don't view this partition as some sort of gospel, but this is based on real data. This is not like some other partition proposals you see floating around the internet. I don't have things here like New France or Tidewater. I did another partition proposal based not on county data, but on the spatial distribution of votes. Combined with what I know about the spatial distribution by race in the United States, I came up with another partition that doesn't adhere to any county lines. Some people will look at these and cry about discontinuities, but the United States has a discontinuity with Alaska. It's no problem. Russia has a discontinuity with Kalinin. There has been no problems about that. I'm sure a lot of people didn't even know about this discontinuity with Russia. And really, all a discontinuity is just an overseas territory in practice. But if really this is so galling to people, those places could become their own countries if you think that would make any real difference. And look, maybe these little snakes I have connecting these liberal Midwestern cities with the Democrat Northeast, maybe this isn't the right solution. Maybe the solution is to give the countries more regular shapes and just make more people move. But if there was a top-down partition of the United States, if the new countries were to have any relation to reality, it would look something like these maps here. One obvious concern people have of partition is the economic dislocation it would cause. But there's a way to prevent economic dislocation at the outset, and that is that all countries start out, at least, with total free trade and open borders between them. Border and trade controls will be added later over time on a case-by-case basis as these countries want them. There's no need for companies and supply chains to radically restructure everything all at once. The new countries will also start off with all the laws, all the taxes, and all the regulations of the current United States as the starting point of the country. So it's not chaos right out of the gate. Businesses don't have to scramble and deal with a whole new world of laws and regulations on day one, and they don't have to massively hire and fire all sorts of people and open and close departments based on what the new countries are going to be. The reforms that each new republic of the former United States does, it does step by step. There's no need to do it all at once and just pray that you get everything right at the moment of separation. Regarding the military and nuclear weapons, I'm perfectly fine with maintaining a common United States military, where the new countries pay taxes for this military and have some organization with representation for each country for the common military. The specifics of representation and how much each country pays would be something agreed upon as we get closer to actually realizing partition. This is actually done with the European Union, and the European Union actually has 31,000 troops, the European Union Army. Of course, the U.S. military would have 1.5 million active duty personnel, or about 50 times as many people as the European Union Army, although I suspect this would be downsized substantially once the U.S. is broken up. But it's just a application of something that has already been done on a much larger scale. I have no crystal ball. I'm just one guy. And there would certainly be many unforeseen problems in breaking up the United States. But as a movement grows, the closer it gets to realizing its objectives, the more and more experts will come out of the woodwork to assist it. The more and more experts it can draw upon, and then the more specific and the more sophisticated the partition proposal will become, and the more sophisticated the solutions to all these problems will become as the movement gains steam. But right now, it's just me. It's just one guy giving the broad strokes of all of this. And at first glance, when you just think about it in holosis, it seems an impossibly large undertaking. But when you look at each step to a successful breakup of a country, it's all nothing that hasn't been done before, and we wouldn't have to do anything that extreme in each individual instance.